My name is Cassandra Khaw. I work as a scriptwriter in Ubisoft Montreal. Prior to this, I've done a lot of freelance game writing. I write a lot of fiction as well. I've also worked in PR. I've written tabletop RPGs. And I worked as a programmer with specialization in AI at some point. I think intrinsically, we grow up with the idea of stories, from bedtime stories to our parents telling us things like, don't do this because of this, don't do that because of that, do this because of this. And it is so rooted in our DNA that we go through life telling stories in every instance of it, from meeting a friend, communicating insecurities or triumphs. That is an expression of story. So everything we do is just connected to that practice. I think for video games to be considered accepted in the cultural whole, it's just going to be a question of time. Cinema and books and every other form of media that we've invented so far has gone through that same process. In the early years, people are just slightly suspicious of it. But as new generations emerge and new generations take over, things become progressively more commonplace. So in the end, it's just a question of waiting, because like everything else before that, we just have to get used to it as a society. And I think sometimes we forget that just because something seems natural to us and comprehensible, it's not true of a society that stretches so many thousands of years, and we need to figure out how things fit into the lifespan of our species. I suspect that I don't know for sure. I am not a historian, and I think that cinema was potentially accepted earlier because it wasn't ever marketed necessarily as a thing for children, and video games comes across as entertainment first and foremost. Pong, Space Invaders, those are not things that we associate with high culture necessarily. Those are examples of play. And I think we are only starting to get around that idea and understand that play can also be used as a medium of communicating more serious topics. How can we change the preconception that gamers are mostly young white males? I think the easiest answer to this is, and weirdly enough, the most complicated answer, most difficult answer to this is, people from marginalized communities, women, people of different ethnicities and so forth have to continue talking about games. Presenting their ideas, presenting their take on video games, whether it's from a critical perspective or from their personal creation. It just needs more voices, because as more voices come out, it enters the perception of the whole and the cultural memory. I think the best way to introduce games to non-gamers is, oddly enough, not to present it as games. Because if you already have preconceptions because of your age and your specific background or personal experience, you're going to look at it and you're going to go, yeah, that's not for me. I think the best way of doing it is going, there is an intense piece of narrative. This is going to connect with you. This is going to inspire you or change you. And this is a new form of entertainment. And if you want to introduce it to a non-gamer, I think it's important as well to be willing to talk to people. One thing I've discovered about discussing games with the older generation, for example, is we take it for granted that everyone knows this click means that, this button means that. If you push this and you add pressure in a certain way, your character will move. As part of the younger generation, we are intuitively aware of this. It has become muscle memory. This is not true for the older generation. For example, for them, it's very natural for them to read maps. And our generation is so indebted to Google Maps. We look at a physical map, we don't know what's happening because we don't have the muscle memory. So don't introduce it as a strange new foreign thing based on their preconceptions, and be willing to sit there and help them through the fundamentals, because we have a responsibility as well to introduce it from the most basic elements. I think video games is amazing in terms of how it can tell stories and how it can convey emotions, because the element of interactivity changes a lot of things. As I discussed in my lecture at CCCB, our brains ultimately don't understand the difference between fiction and truth. It is just that we have so many memories, so many experiential data associated with things that we are able to separate it. But with the use of interactivity, it forces our brains to go, this is not just a story. We are not just a spectator. We are just a spectator. We sit, we listen, we hear, we witness. But when you're moving through something, when you're rummaging through a cabinet or trying to hide under a bed, in the example of amnesia, it takes us one step further out of our heads and moves us deeper into the virtual body. I think virtual reality is incredibly exciting, especially in terms of its application towards the future. At the video game exhibit in CCCB, there was this example of, I don't think it was virtual reality necessarily, but there was this game to help surgeons train a particular skill. And I think virtual reality will be really useful for that, because now with what we have in terms of video games, already we're using interactivity to push somebody out of their body. But to have that element of just being entirely immersed in something is going to add so much more. I wish I could talk more about the topic, but unfortunately virtual reality makes me really, really motion sick within like 5 minutes, so I don't have much personal experience because I don't want to throw up on people. I think video games represent an enormous opportunity in terms of education, first and foremost because it is a language that the young understand. Everyone of a certain generation and over have played video games, are engaged in video games, we're on our phones, like hanging out with people, checking out casual games. So there's a lot of good there. And because there's something so familiar about that, it makes it easier for people to connect via video games. I think teachers might be a little bit hesitant about video games simply because it's new. It's new and it's alien, and as educators, and I'm not speaking as one, so I don't know, and I'm not willing to say that this is an authoritative view. I think educators build a bond with their charges and their students. They want to protect the children. Like, why else would you get into studies? And why would you want to educate kids? Because you want to care for the future generation. And that fear comes from a very protective place. They don't understand this. They've heard poor things about video games. And they want to take care of the people in front of them. So it's going to be a question of time and assistance from various educational bodies and organizations to change that. I think video games is, again, in many ways, an adolescent trying to find its place in the world. I think it needs more space for its marginalized community. I think it needs to listen more to its marginalized community. But at the same time, I think it's just a question of waiting. As we talked about earlier in this interview, we tend to view things in terms of our own lifespan. If something is happening within 20 years, something is happening within 30 years, we think it's a long, long time. But the truth of it is cultural memory stretches thousands of years. So it's new. There are going to be problems. Everything has problems in the beginning, even us as human beings, as animals. We don't know how to walk or how to talk initially. We're going to slip up. Teenagers need to learn, need to access their own emotions, figure out who they are. And I think that's what's happening with the field. Whatever problems we see now is just growing pains. And that will go away if we keep going forward.
Mm-hmm.